Welcome to Living in the Contrast with me, your host, Liz Santiago. Today's episode is all about exploring intuitive tarot and traditional readings. My love for tarot started when I was about 15 years old. I remember exploring it very early through books. Really, those were the only materials I could ever find. So I'd go to like Barnes and Noble with my mom. Some stuff I did look up online, but I didn't have a computer early on and internet like everybody else did around me. So I kind of relied on books. I would actually just go to Barnes and Noble and just read through the occult section. And back then it was just like one small little bookshelf basically. But I explored a lot of different works, especially during my early tarot exploration. I relied on the Complete Guide to Tarot by Eden Gray. I also read numerous works from Scott Cunningham as I was exploring Wicca and things like that as well. I really liked the way that the occult made me feel there were colors to life or more possibilities. I was remembering as I was writing about, you know, first learning tarot, how I used to give my mom readings all the time when I was first learning. I practiced a lot. I used the guidebook to really start to understand the meanings and make sense of things. I think back then, being a 15-year-old, you don't really have a lot of life experience, and I think that reading tarot really requires some life experience, right? I do remember a lot of my readings being very accurate. My mom, that's, I mean, why she had me read so many times for her. She would just come back because she always felt confident in the way that she left me. And maybe it was because she was my mom, that there was this closeness that allowed me to kind of tap in to the energy she was bringing. I learned along the way to this point that the cards are really an extension of me. The cards are a tool. It doesn't matter what tool I'm using to read, I'm going to get a similar message as long as I'm listening and I'm open to receiving. At that time I was really still learning to trust my inner voice. I don't think it was until at this point in my 30s that I started to understand tarot in a different way. I started to understand that tarot is not this rigid structure with a guidebook that you must follow, but rather it's like you use the guidebook to start to develop an understanding of basic symbolism. And as you experience things, you also develop your own system of symbols. So while you progress both in tarot using the guidebooks and progress individually, you're allowing yourself to understand bigger picture ideas through the cards. It's all coming from within you, it's all information you already know and have. The cards are just an avenue to make it, a different form of expression of those things. And like I mentioned before, I was very textbook for a very long time in my readings. Now, when I pull cards, the meaning is really coming from inside of me. The way I see the symbols, the way I perceive the symbols. I understand the pieces that are meant to resonate with me, basically, because you can have one card and get different things. You may see the Emperor in one reading as structure, authority, potentially, and in another reading, understand it as personal balance in the way that you think about the emperor and how he's robed and he has his armor underneath. There's a balance to that. And so understanding how to allow the cards to speak to you in a way that you can understand, in a way that flows with your inner categorization, is really the basis for intuitive reading. And I finally feel like I can understand more of the conversation between the cards. And I don't mean any of this to discourage anyone from using guidebooks, because I use and continue to use guidebooks as I explore, readings and new ideas. It's really more so a combination of consistency with the cards and deepening trust within yourself that's going to open the door for anyone who's interested in really learning tarot more intuitively versus textbook. As I have continued to practice to read and get to know my cards, I can understand now that it's not individual conversations, but it's actually one cohesive conversation. And so each card applies to the one before it and the one after it and so forth. But now I'm able to really understand how they talk to each other and how they mirror certain aspects or show the contrast between aspects. And so the cards speak to me in that way to help me form a larger picture. I understand now that each reading is actually completely unique. You can see one card in multiple readings and have different aspects of that card show up in the reading. It's less about focusing so hard on structure and meaning and more about feeling and using your intuition and allowing yourself to trust that the message that's meant to come out will come out for you. You know, another really kinda cool part of this is that, like, you can see, right, a reading or a set of cards. You can pull out a set of cards and read it a certain way and interpret it a certain way, but another person might see that same set and interpret it slightly different or have other variations that you didn't have, and that's not to make one right or the other wrong. It's it's really a highlighting the individualism for me that tarot has brought, that my unique readings are valuable because that's something I've been trying to build into myself is, appreciating the value in my readings, in my voice and the messages that I carry. And that doesn't devalue anyone else. It's just that each individual message is very important. We are all important. Our voices are all important. And if you feel like you want to get into tarot, but you feel like it's a heavily saturated field, or you just feel like maybe you don't quite understand it or it scares you, just understand that your voice matters, your perspective matters, the way you understand symbols, the way the cards flow out of you matters. So don't get so hung up on comparing yourself to other people. Just know that your individual perspective on your craft is important, and that's what matters the most. In this calling, I find myself trusting this process of letting myself be seen and reading as I feel, not as a book tells me. There's a danger, I think, in being very rigid in readings. And again, I'm not, saying that the guidebooks are not important, but I think that when you remain rigid over time and don't explore, because in a guidebook, even you're getting someone's point of view, someone's experience with the cards, right? But at a certain point, you have to develop your own experience and understanding with the cards. That's what I think allows us to progress as readers, is not being so strict and rigid. It allows us to explore different concepts that maybe you're not going to find in a guidebook, right? That only you know and understand. And that's what makes your unique perspective and input valuable. Tarot has been an avenue for me to practice trusting myself in that, right? Because there's a layer of needing to trust that whatever flows out of you, even if it's not in the guidebook, right? That's the right thing that's meant to be said at that moment or given out. And self-trust is a practice. Tarot has allowed me to really focus on myself and hear my own inner voice and hear my intuition and understand how to trust that even if it doesn't make sense to other people. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one my craft makes sense to, and I know that that's not reality. I know that there are many people who feel the same way about their craft and tarot, but, there's something to be said for the way we fear being seen truly in that way, in sitting with ourselves and accepting our own truths. And it's honestly a great way to explore intuitive nature within ourselves and to honor our divine masculine and feminine energies within ourselves to find balance. I think tarot has been an absolute way for me to find balance. Perhaps this is what tarot has been teaching me all along. Not to search for answers outside of myself, but to trust my inner knowing. Remember that the wisdom has always lived inside of me. The cards didn't give me my intuition, they simply gave me a place to practice trusting it. And maybe that's the invitation I leave with you today. Learn the meanings, study the symbols, honor the traditions, but don't forget to honor yourself too. Because one day you'll realize you aren't just reading the cards, you're reading the language of your soul. Thank you so much for listening today. Um, and I hope you have a great day.